what was said is totally true. You just said it. You made the point. That they really couldn't talk to him. I don't know if it was clear on the video or not. One thing is clear. They were getting fired either way. See, the bottom line here is Vernon did not want the Memphis Mafia around Elvis anymore. Because at that time, in 76, 77, he was running out of money. And frankly, they were sucking him dry. Not only that, but, Parker was too. But he had to figure, Vernon was looking at the bottom line. And Elvis was running out of money. And each week, he had to pay these guys. And he's in the house, and all he sees is them sitting around, screwing off. He don't really see them doing anything because Elvis isn't going on tour much. And he sees them sitting at the house, and they're getting paychecks. So, what are they there for? They're a bunch of, users, a lot of them. That's the way he looked at it. Unfortunately, not all of them were. And a lot of them were his, lifelong friends. But a lot of them were users, using him for what they could get. And he was going to fire pretty much the whole lot of them. Bottom line, he was going to fire every one of them, pretty much. That was his goal, to get rid of everybody. And, ultimately that might have been the best thing. Because then, maybe Priscilla would have came back, which is what Elvis wanted. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That's what he wanted to have happen. He wanted to get her back. He tried to get her back. But she knew that as long as they were around, as long as all these people were around needing Elvis, he could never be what she needed him to be, and he could never be what he wanted to be. So, that's how that went. But Vernon wanted them guys gone. Okay, so when they got in trouble for roughing up some fans, and Elvis's estate was getting sued, Red West, Sonny West were going to get fired either way. And that's when the book idea came about. See, everybody thinks they wrote the book, they got fired. That's not the case. They get roughed up some fans, they got sued, they knew they were going to get fired, so then they kind of went to desperate times come for desperate measures, and then they said, well, we better write this book. If you watch what they said right after they got fired and you watch what they say now, you will start to see the whole picture come together. The bottom line is they knew that the writing was on the wall. They were gone. And you weren't, even when you were there at Graceland, these guys could not talk to Elvis. There was no talking to him. I don't know if you guys know who Howard Hughes is, but Howard Hughes was a billionaire. And Howard Hughes locked himself up in a penthouse in Vegas and never came down. And, literally, he had a beard. The Spruce Goose is the name of the airplane you're talking about. But he was up in this suite, and, for years and years and years. He didn't bathe, he grew a long beard, he didn't take care of himself. He didn't come down. And I'm not saying Elvis was quite like that, but frankly, Elvis was up in his room. He very seldom came down, and when he did, it was only for things that he, late at night, like the night before he passed away, he went to the dentist, or he would admit himself into the hospital, in Memphis, Baptist Memorial, and he would sleep there. He'd just get away from everybody. He'd go to the hospital and admit himself, and that's how he got away from everything. But as far as people, I don't care if you were in the house. You weren't talking to Elvis. You weren't. Hardly anybody got to see him. And even the people that did go up in his room and gave him his daily dose, his daily bag of prescription pills for his elements, the problems he had, even them people didn't get to see him awake because he was asleep. So what were they going to do? Talk to the sleeping guy? And what was, Ginger Alden going to do? Try to wake him up? First of all, she's a young girl. She's intimidated. This guy's 40, 41, 42 years old at the time. And she's not going to wake Elvis up to the fact that he's, why would she do that? You're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. So, obviously she's not doing anything to change nothing. And the guy's coming up into the room can't do anything because he's asleep. And half the time she was asleep too because he gave her prescription pills, so she'd fall asleep. And so, who are you talking to? How are you going to get him to quit? Actually, no, he wasn't. I'm not saying he shouldn't have married Linda. That's not a bad idea, Scott, necessarily, because Linda Thompson wasn't a bad person. And Linda Thompson went through hell, to be honest with you, trying to help him, because those were probably the roughest years that he went through. And she's proven to be a person who helps people who have issues at times, because, I mean, after Elvis, she went to Bruce Jenner, and we don't know how that's going. Nothing wrong with Bruce, but, I mean, she was trying to help him back then. Don't think this is something that just happened overnight with Bruce. I mean, Bruce had these issues long time ago. This isn't just something, I decided today I want to, be a woman. That's not the way it went. I mean, these are things he was dealing with 30 years ago. And Linda was there for him back then. Linda was a good person and is a good person. There's no doubt about that. But the fact of the matter is, after Linda, Elvis wanted Priscilla back. When Linda left, Elvis wanted Priscilla back. Elvis actually asked to have Priscilla back. And Priscilla told Elvis, I can't. Elvis, I will always love you. I will always be a fan of yours. But as long as, you have these guys around and in your lifestyle and the fans need you, Elvis, I'll always be a fan. I will always be there for you, but I can't be your wife. You can never be what you want to be, and I can never be what you need me to be, basically. And, I mean, she was right. But sadly, then nothing against Ginger, because there's nothing wrong with Ginger Alden, but she basically was a clone of Priscilla, but younger. And she couldn't do anything to save him. And I think, sadly, the whole thing with, these people that were in Elvis's life, they couldn't do much for him. The people around him, Charlie, George Klein even, a friend he knew from the 8th grade on, Joe Esposito, none of these people could do anything to save him because he didn't want to hear nothing. He didn't want to hear from them. Elvis, you got a problem. You're gonna die if you keep this up. Elvis says, like, are you guys serious? I'm taking prescription pills. I got glaucoma. I got a sleeping disorder. I got other medical issues that I'm not going to talk about, but I got other medical issues, and I'm taking prescription pills for those reasons. And a lot of the painkillers are for those reasons. And I am prescribed by a doctor. There is absolutely nothing wrong with what I'm doing. So he wasn't doing anything he thought was wrong. But the people around him could see the change in Elvis. From 1973, the Hawaii concert on, there was a drastic change in Elvis's lifestyle, his personality, the way things were done, and how he acted. There was a drastic change in his life, and a drastic change in the way he interacted with his friends and family. And they seen that. Why did they know that? Because when you're around somebody on a day-to-day basis, you can obviously tell a difference in their personality from the way they were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, let's face it. George Klein knew him from the 8th grade. I mean, he was a 12, 13-year-old kid. Red West knew him from the high school when he was 15, 16, 17 years old, 18. And Charlie knew him from right before he went in the military. Not when he went in the military, which is what a lot of people believe. That's the urban legend. He went in the military, ran into Charlie Hodge. He knew Charlie before the military. He was in a band, and he had met him. So all these people in his life could see a change in the way he was. Basically, they were trying to do what they could, but when a guy is locked up in his room, there's no talking to him. I mean, what are you going to do? I went over this and over this and over this with people who have argued this point to me and have said, well, why didn't they save him? Why didn't they do something? Guys, if you don't want to save yourself, you're not going to save yourself. If you've ever been around people who are addicted to something, I don't care what it is, there's nothing you're going to do. They're not going to change until they're ready to change. That's a fact. And there ain't no talking to them. There ain't no doing anything. And I'm sorry, but the only thing you can do is hit them where it hurts. Guys, that's what an intervention is. It's hitting them where it hurts. It's putting it out there. It's putting them in an embarrassing situation. It's making them feel bad about it and getting them to realize and getting them to face their problems. And the only way you could hurt Elvis Presley, was to embarrass him in front of his fans. And I understand everybody that is against Red and Sonny for writing that book. I understand it. But I'm telling you right now, even though 10% of it was wrote out of hurt for being fired, most of it was wrote out of love for Elvis Presley and trying to save the man's life. And the only way you were going to wake that man up, because you couldn't talk to him, you had to go to his fans. You had to hit him where it hurt. And if you got his fans to read this book, it was going to hurt him. And it was going to wake him up. Maybe. You know, and all the people that say Red West and Sonny West were jackasses and they were idiots and they were goofballs and they should have never did what they did, you know, and even though I don't disagree with some of what they say, because, you know, it was a harsh way of doing it, the fact of the matter is Elvis died. That's the sad fact. And they tried. And they weren't wrong. They knew the man was going to die. And he did. I mean, let's be honest. Who was really wrong in all this? You're gonna call Red West and Sonny West a bunch of assholes because they tried to write a book to save the man's life. You don't like the way they went about it, but the fact of the matter is they were right. He died. So you can sit there and say what you want, and you can dislike them, and you can hate them, and all this, but I didn't see anybody else jumping to the front to try and help him. Who tried to save Elvis's life? I didn't see anybody else trying to do anything. I didn't see anybody coming up with any genius ideas. All I see is a lot of talk now, a lot of people trying to justify why they didn't help Elvis, and dissing on Red West and Sonny West because they did. And like I said, I understand everybody that has a problem with what they did. But if you really look at the big picture, and you really look at it for what it is, and you really try to understand why they did it, you're not going to sit here and tell me, or anybody else that knows what they're talking about, that a guy who knew Elvis from high school, and another guy that knew him a couple years later, you know, that many years of his life, you know, I mean, guys, he died at 42. They knew him for like 24 years. They loved the guy. You're not gonna convince me that they didn't have his best interest at hand. I mean, if that's the case, I ask you this one question: if Red West is such an asshole, and if Sonny West is such an asshole, you know, like Red, everybody's against Red West. He's an asshole, you know, because he wrote this book. Let me ask you this: why does Elvis Presley Enterprises allow Red West to be at Elvis Week? Why does Elvis Presley Enterprises allow Red West to talk on different talk shows about Elvis that they actually sponsor? Why does George Klein allow him on his talk show? Why does George Klein call him? Why does George Klein call him a personal friend? If Red West is such an asshole, why does George Klein, who still has an Elvis show every Friday on Sirius Radio across the street from Graceland, why does George Klein consider him a lifelong friend if he's such an asshole? Come on, guys. Be honest. He's not an asshole. Because the real people around Elvis that know the facts know that actually he was trying to help him. Yes, we all understand that about 10% of it was out of anger for getting fired. But they knew they were going to get fired. Okay? It was just they were brokenhearted that they were let go. They'd known Elvis their whole life. That's all they knew. So, I wish you guys would all just do this. Open your mind. Think outside the box. Well, keep in mind this, Scott. Hebler was a very short-term guy. He wasn't, when I talk about Red West and Sonny West, you'll notice I say Red West and Sonny West. I don't talk about Hebler. I'm not saying Hebler was a bad guy, but I think he was just jumping on the bandwagon. Hebler probably was less involved in what I'm talking about than them. Red West and Sonny West is who I'm talking about. So, guys, keep that in mind when you think about what I said. Just keep it in mind and have an open mind. That's all. And with that, we're going to close out the room. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all being here. Thank you to Jerry John for showing up. Marcia Scott, DJ Drew, Little Bit Angel, and everybody else that was in the room. As you know, this room is about Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, the greatest entertainer that ever lived, the one and the only. We will see you tomorrow night. Same time, same place. Good night, everybody.